It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, April 11th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is celebrating the Phantoms are going to the playoffs, Russ.
Yeah, it's good times.
It is. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Flyers Masterton nominee and preview tonight's penultimate matchup against the Columbus Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where we post about our latest episodes. You can also email us at lockedonflyers@gmail and get those mailbag questions in for our segment later this week. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts or over on YouTube. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, the Flyers submitted, or the voters in the media for the Masterton nominees went in, and the Flyers media selected Nick Seeler this year. And I think that's a pretty solid choice.
It is. I mean, I thought, I voted and I had Farabee in there, and I'm good with either one, both for different reasons. The
Right.
Masterton is not just about like who overcame the most injury. It's also about perseverance and things. And Nick wasn't in hockey for a year, so uh,
Yeah.
inexplicably the Blackhawks cut him, and or they didn't cut him. They mutually agreed to part ways, whatever. But he didn't play, and he's found at least temporary home with the Flyers. We'll see, where that goes in the future. But right now, yeah, he's earned it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, obviously it feels like he got a chance with the Flyers because of Chuck Fletcher,
Hmm.
who is no longer here because of their prior relationship with the Minnesota Wild. And I think that, it speaks a lot to his character and, how hard he works that he has made an impression here, especially with John Tortorella, who absolutely loves him. And I think that that it's a really good example of, when you have favor with one staff, just making yourself invaluable
Hmm.
for everybody else and on the team. And we've said our share about wanting to give other guys a chance over Nick Seeler, but we've also given him credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty thrilled for him. Like I think this is definitely well deserved, and I think your point about Farabee is fair too. But
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
they both have different journeys.
Hmm.
Maybe Farabee will win another year. Sealer, yeah, I mean, certainly a good guy and has worked hard. So, it's nice to see him get it in the grand lexicon of things, which I'm, voting on now. What do I think he's going to win? No, I don't. I think there's just too many
Right.
stories. But it's nice that he's at least nominated.
Looking at the remaining couple of games for the Flyers and what the roster situation is going to be, there had been kind of word that maybe Adam Ginning would get a call up from the Phantoms, determining what the situation is with the Phantoms in terms of, do they absolutely need him in the lineup down there. And with the Phantoms playing on Wednesday of this week and the Flyers playing on Tuesday and Thursday, and there's still playoff positioning at stake, I don't know if it's going to happen. Has not as of recording of this episode. Flyers could change their mind, but I'm guessing it's not.
I mean, I can't even get into how all this was sort of like could have been done better. Adder certainly could have played Friday. There's no
For the
reason
Phantoms,
for the
yeah.
Phantoms. There's no reason he couldn't have, right? And Yinning certainly could have played the other day for the Flyers, but instead they played a player short, which makes no sense. I mean, they had a call up to give. Why would you ever go play a short, especially when another team's trying to also set a league record? You decide to play short. I wasn't in favor of that, obviously. So, at this point, I'm just going to shrug all this stuff off. Call it end of the season, whatever, and hope that it gets better next year. Because right now it's just bad.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's just been, yeah, not well handled, let's
No,
say, like you said, and I think that, like, for me, I don't call him up because there is a playoff positioning at stake. They could get home ice advantage in the Calder Cup playoffs, and I think that's something that's important, not just for
yeah,
the players, but
now
for
I
the
get it,
team.
but he could have been called up last game. Is my
Oh,
point.
sure.
But I get it for now. But that was his
Yeah.
opportunity last game. He could have gotten the game, right? Like he could have.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we'll see what they decide to do. But my guess is it'll be a no on the
Yeah, they'll
call
just
up.
do nothing, Rachel. You know how that is.
The Phantoms, on the other hand, had a very exciting last week or so. Not only did they make the playoffs, but they did so in very exciting fashion. Two wonderful games to watch. One which was inexplicable in some ways because they scored 5 goals on 20 shots against Charlotte, and won that one, and then a come from behind victory against Springfield, and so they really, cemented their own destiny here. They got a little help from Bridgeport, but
Hmm.
at the same time, they got it done when they needed to.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I'm happy for them. They're getting the job done. There's guys that have earned it. Now my issue is going to be how many of the young players are you going to play in the playoffs? Because that's what matters in the long term, not the short term. I get it. You want to, you certainly could rotate some of these veterans around so they get in there. I get it because they played this season, but I would have every young player in there that I could because they need the experience. And I just have this sinking feeling, Rachel, that, guys that are, signed for next year's ELCs and guys that are like not regulars on the team, they're going to be hurting for playing time, I think, in the playoffs, and I don't love it.
I think this upcoming week's games are gonna be a big indicator of that, right? Like,
Mhm.
what is the lineup gonna look like going into the playoffs? I think that Ian LaPerriere is gonna want to play as close to the playoff lineup as possible just to lock things down. So, I will be looking for those lines for
Yeah.
sure. In the meantime, the Phantoms had 2 new guys in the lineup this past weekend. Will Smolek, who they signed, 6 or 8 weeks ago at this point, finally got slotted in on D again because they were a little shorthanded with injury and illness. I thought he played really well. Like, I wouldn't say he stood out particularly, but on
Mhm.
D, maybe you don't want to stand out in making a
No, I mean,
mistake.
sometimes you don't, but, again, should it have taken this long? He couldn't have been rotated
Yeah,
in?
I know. That's
It's
what's weird, but
crazy,
I think, his playing style, they just kept it simple with him, and
right?
so he worked really well on breakouts. He didn't really take any chances, and that's exactly what you
I mean,
wanna
a guy
do.
coming out of college knows exactly
Yeah,
what the AHL is. They play very similarly in
yeah.
NCAA hockey. Like, it's an easy fit. It really is.
Yeah, and then, the Phantoms, last week actually had a new signing. Brendan Furry,
Mhm.
signed to a 2-year AHL deal, so it does not affect the Flyers, but he's older. He's 24 years old, plays center, which is really good for their depth, and they slotted him on the 4th line on, Saturday with, I believe it was, Jackson Cates was on his line, as well as, Max Wellman. So that's like some real good support there. And yeah, again, I thought he did really well. Like made some really good offensive minded plays and got back when he needed to. He is from Minnesota State, Mankato,
Right.
which is a smaller school. He was the captain there. He had 28 points this past season, and according to Ian LaPerriere, talking about him between periods, he has some speed, and that's one thing that you notice about him. So I think heading into the playoffs and for next season, he's a good guy to just have around as a solid AHL guy.
Sure. I mean, I would have waited on Jackson Nelson, to be honest, because if they could have gotten him signed, they could have invited him down, played, started an ELC on him for next year. I don't know if he would take that, but I don't know if they offered it either. Uh, but hey, fine, whatever.
Yeah, and obviously it's a different kind of situation within an AHL contract only versus a two-way contract or an
Sure, but
NHL deal.
I'm saying if you're going to add somebody at this time of the year, it's better to add somebody with a higher ceiling. If you're signing someone to an AHL deal, you don't plan on having them in the NHL anytime soon. I'm talking about a guy who plays the same position. If you try and get him and you do get him there, well, then there's a path for that guy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, there's a lot more to talk about with the Phantoms, and we will get to that coming up next.
Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now new customers can step up to the plate with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to fanduel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Hey, another guy to get to bet on is Kodai Senga. He's off to a great start with the Mets, 2-0, and they can't hit the ghost forkball. So that's a good tip for you. So don't miss out on a chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Getting back into the Phantoms and heading into the last week of the season. Right now in the standings, the Phantoms are in a three-way tie for third place in the division. They all have 80 points, but the Phantoms have the tiebreaker in regulation wins. And the division is set in terms of the teams. All six teams that are going to make the playoffs have it locked in. So just need to determine the opponent. And I think that it's going to be real interesting how this all plays out. And like you said, what is the lineup going to be heading into this last week and the playoffs to give them the best chance of success? And as of this past weekend, on Friday, Elliot Denoyer scored again his 22nd goal of the season. That is a tie for the most goals by a rookie in Lehigh Valley history. Not the franchise, but since they moved to
Right.
Lehigh Valley,
Yeah, that makes
the franchise record is 24. Garrett Wilson now has the most penalty minutes in Phantoms history, supplanting the infamous Terrell Goulbourne, who uh, Flyers fans will remember as that guy that would get called up just to start fights. So lots of fond memories with Goulbourne, but or not so fond when you think about where he was drafted. But that being
Oh
said,
no, listen, I remember that. Believe me.
yeah, that was a hell of a pick. But one other piece of good news is that Cooper Merity was back in the lineup. 2 goals and an assist on Friday, got an assist on Saturday, and I think having him back is going to be critical. As you talk about one of the AHL guys, but who has a lot more potential in his game. I think
Mhm.
it's going to be huge having him back heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, he's definitely a catalyst and a guy you want to keep in there, no question about it. Um, but again, there's things that I would like to see, and one of those things. And again, I'm right now. What's the status of Zamula?
No, he was injured.
He was injured. Okay, I wasn't sure. So I'd like to see Zamula get in. I don't think they need Belpedio and Connaughton in this lineup. Um, and if they don't have long-term plans for Wiley, then maybe you make a switch there. But um, I want some of these young guys to get. Well, actually, Wiley would be out anyhow because um, Ronnie Attard will be in there. So that's what I want. I want mostly these guys that are going to impact the Flyers. Some of them maybe next year, some of them in 2 years. Uh, they could, this is where I'm going to find out exactly what the organization is planning on doing as far as development. Because they all kept saying, listen, they all have to be down there. It's going to be great to win a championship. It's great if you're playing. It's not great if you're watching.
Yeah, I think as far as the vets go, Anisimov was hurt on Friday and did not play on Saturday, but he's definitely somebody that you
No,
want
you
in
want him in
there
there. That's fine.
as long as he's healthy. I think Brooks you want in there, and I do think you want Belpedio in there. I think Connaughton is another story. I think,
You don't need
you
Max
can.
Roman in there. You don't.
No,
And really, Cal
but
O'Reilly,
he's really only been playing on the 4th line.
yeah, but
Cal
still,
O'Reilly's your captain. You have to play him,
I
like,
guess. I guess,
um
but again, see, this is where they're kind of locking themselves in. There are going to be young players sitting. There are, and that's going to bug me because we'll see how many games some of them get. I get it with the captain thing, fine, but um, you know,
yeah, some of them have just been hurt, to be honest.
yeah,
So, I think that is having an impact as much as anything right now, is in terms of injury and some recent illnesses that have kept certain guys out. But I think that, as far as the guys that you really want in there, Ollie Lixel is on that top line. So
yeah,
is Tyson Forster. I think that's exactly the way it should be. Brink has been playing between the second and third line, which I think makes sense. I want Denoye as that second line center. I think he needs to step up and play those kind of minutes.
yeah. I mean, Brooks
Um,
technically doesn't need to be in there, technically.
right. But he's been playing really well. So I would put him just down the lineup.
I mean,
Um,
I want to say, I'd want to put Wisdom in
yeah.
the lineup and see what I'm going to get out of him, though, because again, he if he sits for the whole AHL playoffs, where you drafted him, what your expectations were for him, he's going to be behind schedule. And that's the thing. I mean, unless they plan on having Adam Brooks next year with the Phantoms and or with the Flyers, like whatever. Like Cal O'Reilly, I'll live with because, like you said, he's the captain. Fine, even though he may not even be there next year, but he's the captain. Okay, but not all these guys have to be playing. I mean, really. I have to drive this point home only because they played this up. The Flyers played this up, and now they have a chance to really back it up.
Yeah, we'll see how it turns out. Again, I think health is just gonna have a huge impact on what the decisions are, and, I think that what we see on Wednesday is gonna be a huge indicator about what they're gonna be doing heading into the playoffs, because I think that they're gonna want, depending on what the point total is, and if they're still fighting for that home ice advantage, they're gonna wanna put the absolute best lineup they can ice to try and gain that position. And, you know, somebody like Zayd Wisdom, who's had an up and down season, I totally get your point, in terms of getting him in these key situations. But at the same time, if they're fighting for home ice advantage and he's not the guy that's going to get you there, I don't know. It is an interesting question, and I think there's definitely both ways to look at it, that you want your guys in these key moments, like, you want your top prospects in these key moments, but you also have, games to win. So, tough decisions for Lappy and the staff in Lehigh Valley to make. I think that, if you look at their remaining schedule, they play at Bridgeport on Wednesday. Then they've got a back to back on Friday and Saturday against Charlotte, who they just faced and won pretty handily against. Charlotte's kind of a mess right now. It's very weird.
Yeah.
Um, but They finish up the season Saturday at Hershey, which is just brutal. So if home ice is on the line and they've got to win one at Hershey, that's going to be real tough. Now, Springfield plays at Providence on Sunday, so it could be out of their hands, and they just got to wait through
Mhm.
the end of the season on Sunday to see what happens. But the upshot is that they're in the playoffs, and we'll have to wait until the last day of the season next Sunday to determine the final seedings and what the schedule is going to be. So lots more to talk about with the Phantoms here. I'm personally very excited. I'm hoping to make it to a playoff game if I can, just to get the atmosphere in there. It's so much fun getting to see like really good Phantoms hockey.
Yeah, no question. If they go deep, I'll definitely get in there. I've covered the Calder Cup before. I have loved it. So we'll see. But I'm hoping the best for them. And yeah, I want players to develop, even if they go out in the first round. If they're playing the right players and they get the experience, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't know if Lappy's okay with that.
Well,
That's my
again,
question.
this is the organization is a greater not worry, but it's more important for the organization than actually for the Phantoms. It is. And that's for the greater good. So, and that's how I've watched players develop forever. So if they can, as an example, if Ian LePerrier sits with the same lineup and says yes, they need to do exactly what you said, we got to fight for these playoff spots, and then leaves the same lineup for the playoffs, and there are some guys that just sit and they never get in there. It's not the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's a valid perspective to have. So, again, what the team does is another thing, and
Yep.
we will follow up, of course, over the next week as the Phantoms wrap up their season. In the meantime, we have a Flyers game to talk about tonight, and we will do that coming up next. So, Russ, there are some lottery implications at stake tonight against Columbus for the Flyers. Now, less so for the Flyers, but more so for Columbus. Right now, they have the edge on the Sharks and Chicago. So they have one less regulation win and two fewer regulation wins than Chicago. But Anaheim has two fewer regulation wins than Columbus does. Columbus is facing the Flyers, the Pens, and the Sabres as their remaining games. And uh, I think obviously with the Flyers, it's a different situation, but facing the Pens who could be fighting for their lives and the Sabres, that could be their last chance to potentially make the playoffs. Although I don't think it's going to happen because I think Florida is going to seal up one of those spots pretty well. But that being said, I think that it's not going to affect how Columbus plays, but just in terms of the overall picture we're looking at. Whereas with the Flyers, the lottery spot is pretty much set at 7 because the Flyers have 5 more regulation wins than the Habs and have 3 points on them, 6 more regulation wins than the Yotes, and there's 2 points separating them. So essentially, the Flyers would have to lose both games, and the Habs or Yotes would have to win both of their remaining games in
Yeah, the
order
Flyers don't
for.
need to tank at this point. They've already made
Yeah,
their bet, so they can
yeah,
try and win games, and
yeah.
probably a good idea to try and win a couple because they just looked awful, and I don't think you want to necessarily end the season that way. If you were tanking all year, fine, I get it, but they're not. So they could use a couple wins to at least
Yeah,
feel good about things. If they lose out, let's say, it's not going to feel great this season. It just won't. And then we'll have all kinds of questions as to how the change has, what changes have we actually seen?
exactly. So I'm in it to win these couple of games because again, it's not going to make
It
any
doesn't matter.
difference.
It's a few percentage points.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, with Columbus, like they're still in an everybody is broken situation.
Yeah.
As we recall, Zach Werenski was hurt in the game versus the Flyers in November. He's been out all season. Just Patrick Laine has been out. Jake Bean has been out. Eric Goodbranson has been out. Elvis Merzlikins has been out. Just everybody.
There's one guy
So
who hasn't been out, who will be
that
playing
would
in front of
be
the home crowd and who could have been a Flyer.
David Jiricek, wouldn't it?
Well, that's one. No, but I was actually thinking of Goudreau.
I
And
know. That's why I said
I know.
Jiricek.
That was good, though. And yeah, Goudreau will certainly have a chip on his shoulder, and he could come in the same way that, I don't know, David Pastrnak came in with that same sort of resolve. But yeah, Jiricek will be fun to watch. And it may not be fun for Flyers fans knowing what they missed out on. That's all.
Yeah, I think so too. It's just I don't know if this is going to be like a battle of wills to like play good hockey versus not playing good hockey. I just feel like it's going to be an ugly game across the
Yeah,
board.
I don't think Columbus is going to come in and try and tank it. So I think they'll all be trying to win. The question is, you have to ask: are the Flyers going to try and win their way? So it's like Tony DeAngelo scratched for the rest of the year. Maybe, we don't know. So it'll be interesting to see if they're just going to keep going shorthanded.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll go shorthanded, but or try and put Delorier at D again.
But he didn't
Uh,
play any D. He didn't do
no.
any. He was just on the sheet. He was on D, but he never actually played defense.
That is true. But yeah, it'll be, I don't know, man. I don't know what Torres is thinking right now. But
Nobody
he's
does.
got 2 more games to ice a lineup and see what these guys can do to maybe finish out strong and be on more of a positive note heading into the off season. I think, the Torts used to coach at Columbus, Goudreau factor, going in there and winning. That could be a thing. I would hope it would be a thing for them, just to have some positivity here in these last couple of games.
Yeah, I think you want to add some of that. So I think you try your best, and I think you do the best thing for the team. Now, if the best thing for the team is to not play D'Angelo and you don't have anybody else to play, all right. I mean, I guess that's what you'd have to do.
Yeah, and like I said, with the travel, I just don't see like calling up somebody from Lehigh Valley as being a useful thing right now. So just put them in.
No,
Just
that time is probably past, but it could have happened. But the time is past now. So yeah, I mean, now
just
you,
put Tony D'Angelo in and let him be happy and prove himself. Honestly.
yeah.
I think that's the way to go. But we will certainly be back tomorrow to talk about that game. And if Tortorella did play Tony D'Angelo, wrapping up with our Flyers fun thing. Gritty has come out of hibernation a little bit in terms of getting out there and doing stuff over the last week or so. And with Easter, Gritty showed up at the White House, lo and behold, for the egg roll. I think Jill Biden must have had something to do with
Oh, I'm sure
that.
she invited him. Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of helps having a Philly family in the White House and to get Gritty these sorts of invites.
I was jealous
I
because I've been in the White House twice. I've been in the press corps room, the situation room there. I've been sort of close where Gritty was on the lawn there, but you don't get that close. So I was like, I don't know,
yeah
maybe like 200 feet away from Michelle Obama, 100 feet away, whatever it was, that little bit of safe distance. So Gritty got
yeah.
closer than I did. I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, I spent some quality time on the White House lawn back in the day, but that's a story for another time.
There you go.
But I think that the most interesting part of it for me was, you have Gritty's handlers that look like Secret Service, and were they going to be allowed to show up in costume because they
Well, the
look too much
question that
like
I would
Secret
have
Service?
is, I would have to think at this point the White House knows the identification of Gritty, who Gritty really is.
Oh yeah, they do. They have to.
They have to.
So that's going to be a state secret, huh?
So, like, if that ever leaks out, we'll know where the leak came from because they know for sure.
That's true. They do know. All right. Well, Maybe we can find somebody who knows and get the dirt on that. In the meantime, like I said, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about the Columbus game. And we will be talking to Haley Taylor from 97.5, The Fanatic, with her take on the Flyers season this year. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send us your mailbag questions via Twitter at Locked On Flyers, or you can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. Now make your next listen Game to Game NHL. It's every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. It's on the Locked On NHL feed anywhere you get your podcasts. Have a great day.